Ladies and gentlemen, the Pastor Funny podcast is on the air. I'm Pastor Funny. This is my ladder. These are lights, tarps. Why am I showing you this? Because everything is not really ready yet, but I'm not letting it stop me because I said the Pastor Funny podcast was starting today, and I meant it. It's not an April Fool's Day joke. This is my neon sign that I got for Christmas, Pastor Funny Podcast. But guess what? It's not going to be flashing, and it's not going to be on a music stand. It's going to be on this nice comedy brick wall. So we are going to get started with episode 1 of the Pastor Funny Podcast. It's not going to be perfect. I did do several, about six, about a couple years ago, but we're starting all over, and we're going to talk about that today on the Pastor Funny Podcast. I am the host, Pastor Funny. I am a comedian and a pastor and a dad, so I may tell jokes that are worthy of the stage, and I may tell dad jokes, but you know what? Whether you laugh or you groan or giggle or grin, the most important thing is I help you grow closer to God, because that's what we're here for. You know, there's enough things in this world. I mean, we take God and His Word seriously, and ourselves not so much, because there's so much stuff in this world that can make us cry. And if we don't laugh, we're going to cry. And I already cry enough, because when I watch things like Ninja Warrior and they tell touching stories, I'm bawling in my recliner. Or AGT, America's Got Talent, when somebody talks about being bullied as a kid and they get a golden buzzer, I'm crying watching it. You know what? I'd rather laugh than cry. So the Pastor Funny Podcast, episode 1. You know, I heard about an atheist that filed a lawsuit claiming it was unfair that religious people got all these holidays while atheists had none. The judge listened carefully and then ruled, your argument is invalid. You already have a holiday. April Fool's Day. The Bible says, a fool says in his heart there is no God. You know, I promised on Facebook, I promised some people face to face that this podcast was going to start. So even though things are not ready, you know what? This has been my problem. I'm just going to admit it right up front, because I keep waiting and waiting and waiting, because it looks like things are going to be ready. Things are going to be ready. And I know it's going to be a while, but then something happens and I feel like, it's going to happen anytime now. And then I keep waiting and then I keep waiting and I keep waiting. And like right now, it'd be really easy to say, you know what? Let's just wait, because we're just probably a week or two away from having all the equipment up. But we're not going to wait, because today we're going to talk about what can toilets, an unfinished office podcast studio, teach you about God, faith, and His plans for you. Stay tuned for episode 1 of the Pastor Funny Podcast. Today, I want to share one of my favorite stories. It's called the BC story. Now, I was trying to figure out a way to edit a video where I had told the story and you could hear people laughing, but you know what? I'll be honest. It is midnight, so I want to get this, and it actually is April Fool's Day right now. I want to get this uploaded to YouTube, so I am not even going to try to splice it. Again, I'm not giving up, because we're going to do this episode today. And here's the story of the BC story. There was this lady who was very prim and proper, and her husband were going to go to this rustic campground. And she wanted to make sure that the campground had their own toilets. So she wrote a letter saying, do your campground have your own toilets? And she read it and went, you know what, that's just too vulgar. So she changed it to facilities. And even that, she was like, no, that's not, no. So she said bathroom commodes. And being prim and proper, even that was too much for her. So she abbreviated it BC. Now the campground manager got the letter. Does your campground facility have its own BC? He was not so prim and proper. He had no idea what she was talking about. Showed it to all the other campers, and they came to the conclusion that it was Baptist Church. So this lady, thinking bathroom commodes, got this letter in the mail. Dear Madam, I regret very much to inform you that our campground does not have its own BC. But I I take pleasure in informing you that the BC is only 9 miles north of the campground and is capable of seating 250 people at one time. I admit it is quite a distance away if you're in the habit of going regularly, but no doubt you'll be pleased to know that a great number of people take their lunches along and make a day of it. They usually arrive early and stay late. The last time my wife and I went was about 6 years ago. It was so crowded we had to stand up the whole time we were there. I would like to say that it pains me very much to not be able to go more regularly, but it's certainly no lack of desire on my part. As we grow older, it seems more of an effort, particularly in cold weather. The acoustics are very good, so everyone can hear the slightest sound. It may surprise you to know that my daughter met her husband there and was married in our BC. We're also having a fundraiser to purchase plush seats, as the old ones have holes in them. If you decide to come down to our campground, perhaps I could go with you the first time, sit with you, and introduce you to all the folks. Remember, this is a friendly campground. Now, why do I tell you this story at the beginning of episode 1? What toilets and unfinished spaces can teach us about God. Because I'm going to say I have a pee-pee problem. Now, I'm not talking about, like depends. But my pee-pee problem is procrastination and perfectionism. And this is what has kept this from going on. As I've already said, when I was pastoring All Tribes Christian Life Center, got a studio set up in there. I could tell that we were getting ready to retire, but God had other things in mind because now I'm an associate pastor on staff up at a church with my wife. And so then, I was moving, and then we bought the new house, and then there was an old garage, and my son was going to remodel it. And I kept thinking, okay, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And next thing I know, it's been 2 years, and I finally said, you know what? I can't wait any longer. I got to do this. And you know what? Procrastination and perfectionism, I've been able to nail it down, that those two things have what stopped me in the past. And I'm not going to let them stop me from getting this podcast up and running. A scripture I wanted you to think about today is Ecclesiastes 11, 1 through 6 in the New Living. It's called The Uncertainties of Life. Send your grain across the seas, and in time prophets will flow back to you. It has nothing to do with black as a color. The prophets will flow back to you. But divide your investments among many places, for you do not know what risks lie ahead of you. No, I'm not Dave Ramsey. This is not call in for financial advice. This is talking about like a merchant ship sending grain across the water. You see, we can plan for the future, but we really don't know what the future holds. I have a lot of ideas for this podcast, and that's part of the reason why I was in this holding pattern. Because I was focusing on so many different ideas. Am I going to do a daily devotional that's short? Am I going to do a longer one once a week? Am I going to get a co-host? Am I going to write books that tie into this? And, I had a theme song that I even wrote, and just a wide variety of ideas. And all these ideas bouncing around in my head kept me from stepping out. Perfection and procrastination. And this podcast almost seemed like it was a myth. It was a dream that was never going to happen. My question is for you, are there things in your life that you're not sure about, and you keep waiting for the right time to start something, to do something, or to stop something? And you're wrestling with this idea and that idea. Maybe today is the day, like it was for me, to start doing something or to stop doing something. Verse 3 says, when clouds are heavy, the rains come down. Whether a tree falls north or south, it stays where it falls. I love verse 4. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. That was me. And hopefully, if it is you, you also feel like I need to take some action. Farmers who wait for perfect weather. It's always going to be too hot, too cold. The days are too short. The days are too long. It's raining too much. It's not raining enough. There's There's always going to be something to stop us. Like this, I could have said, man, I am so close. Like right now, it's midnight. I could stop. I could just say April Fool's Day and then tomorrow I'll work on. No, there's always going to be a reason to not do something. And we need to catch ourselves with procrastination and perfectionism. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. I love this picture. That's what kept me and maybe you from doing something, waiting for the perfect timing. For me, it was when everything was built, when everything was painted, when I had the best equipment, when this was up and running, when that was up and running. Verse 5 says, just as you cannot understand the path of the wind or the mystery of a tiny baby growing in its mother's womb, so you cannot understand the activity of God who does all things. God does all things. Now that doesn't mean we do nothing, because if we do nothing, guess what we'll get? Nothing. Because not only did I not do this podcast because I kept waiting for the perfect timing, but I also learned that God didn't do it for me. I never woke up and there was 2 or 3 episodes of the Pastor Funny podcast ready to be uploaded onto YouTube. No. And like this podcast, if I keep waiting to start, God won't start it for me. And here's the thing. The same thing is true with you. God won't do what the farmer must do, but the farmer cannot do what God must do. Throughout the Bible, we find verses that can be broken up into my part and God's part. For example, Psalm 37, 3 and 4, trust in the Lord and do good, our part. Then you will live safely in the land and prosper, God's part. Take delight in the Lord, our part, and he will give you the desires of your heart, God's part. You see, we have this idea of both the merchant sending ships and the farmer sowing seeds. And Warren Wiersbe says this, in both activities, a great deal of faith is required. Why? Because neither the merchant nor the farmer can control the circumstances. My friends, neither you or I can control the circumstances of our life. It's okay to dream. It's okay to wait on the Lord. It's okay to do all those things, but don't let it make you become inactive. Keep focused on God. And step out in faith and do what he says to do. It's okay to think, and it's okay to dream, and it's okay to try and reason the best way to do something. But, and this is a big but, be very careful, or you'll be like the farmer who waits for perfect weather and never plants. And if you watch every cloud, you'll never harvest. I admitted my PP problem, procrastination and perfectionism. Maybe you struggle with the same things. Or maybe you have a DD problem, doubt and discouragement. Or pick any letter and admit it and take action. Don't delay, or you might be like how this podcast was, stuck in waiting for 2 years, and it would not have got going unless I said it's going to happen. I heard once someone say, we'll end with this, when is the best time to plant a tree? The answer is 20 years ago. Some things say 30, but 20 years ago. And the second best time to plant a tree is today. So my friends, I encourage you today to stop procrastinating and waiting for the perfect time to do something, and ask God if today is the day to start. I've been working on a book called The Art and Science of Procrastination, the essential guide and handbook of how to procrastinate that's as far as I've got. I've been working on it for years. But anyways, hope you enjoyed this episode. Stick around for episode 2, but don't wait for episode 2 to take action with maybe something you've been waiting and holding off on in your life. Because I've learned with this podcast, if you wait for things to get perfect and you wait for the right time, it'll never happen. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be like that farmer who waits for perfect weather and never plant, because then you never get any crops. And I want to bear a harvest, and I want you to bear harvest. So go planting. God bless you. See you next time.